Sonic female. Sonic. Sonic female. Sonic. Sonic. Sonic female. You're listening to Sonic Female Podcast with Justine Blazer. Today on Sonic Female, we have our first male guest. He is a Detroit born and raised folk Americana singer and songwriter. We're going to talk about his music, his journey, his road to recovery from addiction, his family connection to Pine Knob in Detroit, and his thoughts on atheism. I'm here today with Luke Holden. How are you today?
Hey, happy to be here.
In studio. Luke has been a friend of mine for several years, and you hail from Detroit, Michigan, which is where I come from. I just want to say you are the first male guest on my show. So how's it feel to be the first male guest?
Absolutely honored. From Michigan, no less, too.
Well, it's true. And that's kind of why I wanted to bring you on the show today, because obviously we have a lot of things we represent. We're both from Detroit. We both have had a few different struggles. You definitely have had your fair share of struggles, and you definitely embody that into your artistry, into your music. And so I find that super interesting. And that's why I wanted to bring you on today, because I feel like you have a great story and a great message. And I love your music. And I feel like a lot of people can resonate with that as well. So talk about kind of what your style is right now.
Sure. Well, first off, thank you for having me.
Oh, no problem.
This is cool. Very cool. This is a very tasteful room I'm in. Nobody can see it, but there's like guitars on the wall, and I see a mandolin over there.
Yeah. Candles lit.
Yes. But at any rate, it's funny when people ask me to describe my music. First off, I'm so confident in what I do, and I love what I do. But I kind of get at a standstill. I'm like, how do I compartmentalize this into a word? Because they're just going to confuse the hell out of people. But if I was going to, actually put it into a genre, so to speak, I always say it's like a very dark Americana grunge element. There's facets of fundamental American folk music, what have you, woven in with a heavier rock element that definitely errs on the side of, I would even say, morbid at times. But
you've had a few different singles released, so talk about those. What is your first single? What is your most recent single? And why did you decide to release those?
The first thing that I did after moving here is I'd written a song called The Bitter Waltz, which isn't even composed as a waltz.
Just called that.
It's misleading, but it's a duet with Melanie Bresnan.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. I'd have to pull it up. It's only on SoundCloud, but if you look it up, Luke Joseph. That was when I was still going as Luke Joseph.
You were going by a lot of different names. I know you as Luke Lacricchio, and then Luke Joseph, and then now Luke Holden. So you definitely went through some phases of names.
The artist formerly known as, I can't promise it's not going to change again, but
why the name change? Why do you keep doing that?
At first I was it was tough, because I love my name. I have a very Sicilian name. It's Luke Lacricchio. Actually, my legal name is Jeremy. That's a whole nother thing. I love telling people that I love the
saga.
It's true. Yeah, they just the dumbfounded look. But the only people who call me Jeremy are telemarketers and doctors who don't know me. But at any rate, Luke Joseph was something I was like, okay, well, that's easy to remember. It's easy to go by because it's my middle name, Joseph is. And I realized there was kind of a common trend with that, people using their middle names in Nashville, which that's great. It can really work, but it just sounded weird for me. I feel like middle names are reserved for when you're in trouble. And it's like your mom's like, Luke Joseph.
Luke Joseph, get over here.
Get over here. And then you're running out the opposite direction. But no, then I decided Holden. It hit me. I was like, damn, man. Because if you've ever spent 5 minutes alone in a room with me, I've probably gone off on a tangent about a book that I'm obsessed with called Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy. I don't shut the hell up about this book, and
What's so fascinating about it?
He's the one who wrote No Country for Old Men.
Oh, okay.
And I read this. I had started it in college and then never actually finished it. And then a few years back, I cracked it open again, and it just. I mean, if you've ever read this book, or know anything about it, it's this, vicious saga about, the Native American scalp trade after the Mexican-American War, and it's based on true events, sparse accounts, but it's just this. I mean, there's this freaking magnetism to this book that is, there's so much brutality in it, but it's so poetically presented too.
Love that.
And there's something so existential and rare about it, and it just gripped me, man. It sunk its claws into me, and I mean, I still assert to this day that I will write, direct, and release the film one day.
That's a great goal.
Yes,
it's amazing.
Among others, but one of the characters is named Judge Holden. He's actually right here on my arm on this massive tattoo that I got.
You have lots of tattoos.
Yeah, I've lost count. But I have this one that's dedicated to the book, and he's this very enigmatic sort of demigod, anti-hero character, and he was, for all intents and purposes, a real historical character. There's very little known about him, but I said Holden. Damn, Luke Holden, that'll do.
It's got a nice ring to it.
It does, yeah.
Yeah, it sure does. So you released the Bitter Waltz, and then you worked with Pete Jacobs.
A Black Dog Recording.
At Black Dog Recording, and then you and I have been working on some new stuff. We just did a track called Loose Tourniquet. It's amazing. Well, here it is. Let's play it right now. This is called Loose Tourniquets by Luke Holden.
All I am is on for naught, lost in space since you slipped a knot. Something like a spider in my head. The bitch bites down and the venom spreads. I'm falling on the hard side, leaving you, and I can feel these tourniquets bleeding through, but I can sound the rapture too. It's like winter's moon in the mouth of hell. Everything's cold when you're not around. The hangman said that the debt is paid as he holds me over a pit of snakes. I'm falling on the hard side, leaving you, and I can feel these tourniquets bleeding through, but I can sound the rapture too. I'm falling on the hard side, leaving you, and I can feel these tourniquets bleeding through, but I can sound the rapture too. I'm falling on the hard side, leaving you, and I can feel these tourniquets bleeding through, but I can sound the rapture too. Oh, well, I can sound the rapture too.
I love that track. That was so much fun making that track and getting that out there. Why did you decide to make it an acoustic track?
I would like, because I have this new album coming out. I released one about a year and a half ago called Ivory. If you've been following my music, that's a whole 9-track album of songs. A few I've written down here, a few I'd written before the fact. And I'm very happy with that album. But this time around, why did I do an acoustic track? Loose Tourniquets is actually going to be on the record, on Heathen Prayers. But I want something a little bit more stripped down. First off, I really wanted to work with you. and I wanted to make it count. And doing this, I want to edit it as a bonus track to my record. So there's something a little bit supplemental that people can listen to, of a more stripped down skeletal version of a song that is otherwise going to be, accompanied with a lot of bells and whistles. And I really enjoy that element.
Yeah, absolutely.
Song,
I mean, I think that's important to every artist, is have something like that, like have a track where it is acoustic. And I think it really showcases your true talent and your artistry. You can't hide behind, drums and tracks and things like that.
It's unadulterated.
So I love it. Came here 8 years ago.
To this day.
8
years ago to this day.
You moved here right after graduation.
Yeah.
You're only 25, 26?
27.
27.
Who's counting?
Who's counting? I always consider you an old soul. You always seem so much more wiser behind your years, and I think that's important. Why your upbringing is all about. So, kind of, how were you as a child? I know we have a family connection a little bit, because your uncle used to book me back in Detroit.
Yeah.
You can talk about that, and then you have kind of a legacy back in Detroit with Pine Knob. So, back us up a little bit. How did it all start?
Well, 1991, October 21st, that's when the mayhem began. Thank my mother for that. She gave birth to me, who's the sweetest woman in the entire world. I love her.
Your mom is very sweet.
Oh, she's incredible. But yeah, I early years in Michigan, stayed in Michigan my whole life, up until I wasn't in Michigan. But I had a great family. I'm still very close with them. We're Sicilian, so bonded by that.
Pasta, Parmesan cheese.
We make our own. We can our own tomato sauce every year. I got to bring you a jar. I'm sorry I haven't yet.
Yeah, come on. What's going on, Luke? Luke Jeremy.
I'm getting there.
What kind of kid were you? Were you like a good kid? Were you kind of a rebel?
I mean, I could paint myself up to be, just the greatest little kid in the entire world, but other accounts might differ. But no, I was a good kid. I was a happy kid. I really was. I was a social kid. I had friends and whatnot, but I still loved my alone time. Like I loved to read. I really enjoyed sitting aside during recess and what have you in elementary school. I would either read or I would swing. That's what it was. I would swing like a frickin' metronome. Like everyone's like, "What are you doing, dude?" I'm like, "I'm swinging. Leave me alone. I don't want to play soccer." So
you weren't necessarily an athletic kid. You're more into the arts.
Yeah. I mean, I played baseball and basketball growing up when I was really young, and I was actually really good at those sports, but gravitated toward other things that became more constant. Obviously, I mean, I'm here and pursuing them in Nashville.
Yeah.
So,
well, what was the moment for you? Let's say your adolescence, and you were like, "Hey, I want to be a singer-songwriter." I mean, what was that moment like?
I remember it to a T. Greg Marley. He's longtime family friend. My dad's one of his best friends since high school. Just a huge, molding force since I was a kid, still to this day. And I remember we were in Traverse City, Michigan.
Love Traverse City.
Yeah, I'm sure you know all about it.
Mm-hmm.
And, I spent a lot of my early years, and to this day we have a house up there. And I remember watching him play an acoustic guitar, and I mean, it was just, I remember so impeccably that scene, and I was like, God, I want to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was just such a deity in that moment. And
how old were you?
Oh God, 8 maybe.
Oh wow,
maybe
so I was young.
7 or 8, and so then I started playing guitar with my dad. I think the following summer, and chain reactions.
Yeah, because your family owned Pine Knob. Now, if you're not familiar, it's now called DTE. It's sort of our version in Detroit of like Ascend in Nashville. It's an outdoor amphitheater, and it's a big deal in Detroit. So your family owned that, correct?
My grandfather did. He
Okay.
was he'd built it and owned it. I think before he was 30 years old. Actually.
Wow.
Yeah. It was his massive life project. It's a compound ski hill golf course music theater that still stands today as such a monument. Artists will still come around from Kid Rock lives in Clarkston or has up until recently. I'm not sure if he's his permanent residence is now down here. Bob Seger for one. And anyone else I've ever seen at that venue growing up, they've all said, yeah, it's DTE, but I always call it Pine Knob.
Yep.
I remember Mark Knopfler. No, not Mark Knopfler. Who plays for Grand Funk? What's the guy? Mark Farner.
Oh, Mark Farner, yeah.
Yeah, said the same thing. But, I bore witness to that growing up, and it was the coolest thing ever. And he built that, I believe it was in 1971, 72, with, certain partners. And it's one of those things where by 1980, his role had been eradicated, so to speak. 1970s, 100% Sicilian guy, Detroit, Michigan. Naturally, there's going to be rumors of mafia activity, what have you, which, yeah, I know.
Give us the deeds. Come on.
There's plenty of deeds. And I need to be clear about something first and foremost, is that he was a self-made man, and he worked his ass off, and he created a legacy that people across the world to this day get to enjoy. I mean, I remember seeing the Foo Fighters there 5 years ago or so.
That was my first concert.
Foo Fighters?
No, or DT
Pine
Knob.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was 15, and we saw Hank Williams Jr. and Kid Rock, who just started making out in the scene. And
That's great.
we were sitting up on the lawn, and we were just all in high school, and it was just a really fun time. So a lot of great memories. I know, a lot of great memories. And so that's really cool that you have that connection. And that was something that you probably grew up being a part of, and just seeing that kind of in and out. I mean, it had to make an impact on your music.
Big time to this day. And again, one of those things that I after I write and direct Blood Meridian, I'm going to use the funds to buy back Pine Knob. That's going to be,
and call it Pine Knob.
Exactly.
Why did it change like that? Do you know the history behind that?
I think that it was Pine Knob up until the
2000s, I think.
Yeah, maybe 15 years ago. Longer than that, but it was Pine Knob up until that point. And there was a lot of political back and forth, political bloodshed, so to speak. More than anything, I would use the word political as opposed to justified, that my grandfather was caught in the crossfires of. And, there was a lot of hamstringing, from what I understand.
What does that mean?
I think that he became more than anything a political target by people around him that were trying to absorb certain elements of what he had created. And regardless of what kind of rumors, have been proliferated throughout, Michigan and the Lacricchio family in the past 40 years or so. What I do know is he was a self-made man, and those rumors and those things, those news articles that really ultimately brought him down, my family suffered because of it. They really do. I even, I'll run into people to this day, even around Nashville, who are from Michigan, and they'll say, "Oh, Lacricchio, I know all about them." I'm like, "No, you don't." You think
really?
You do. Yeah, it's a whole thing. But he was also highly respected and highly loved. I knew him in my early years, and incredible person, hardworking, and just adored by people who truly knew him. And a lot of this, has been perpetuated to me by my family, by my dad, again, who is my best friend. And that's a whole nother thing.
That's really interesting. So do you have any connection to it now, or is it completely segregated?
Just sentimental
Yeah.
connection.
Yeah.
I'll always see concerts there, and anytime somebody says it will always be Pine Knob to me, I'm like,
yeah, it's true. It'll always be Pine Knob. So we have actually another connection because we wrote a song together called Broken Girls Don't Cry.
We did.
And it actually made it on my latest album, Pioneer Soul Shaker.
Soul Shaker.
So that
it was on a billboard on West End.
It was. I know. It's wild. But yeah, we did write that. That was like one of our first co-writes back in a few years ago. And when I first met you, it was actually at the Broadway Brew House. And I remember you'd reached out to me, and we sat down and we were really talking about, our life and our path. And it was just really refreshing to talk to somebody back home from Michigan, because everyone here in Nashville is just from all over everywhere, which is great. I love it. But sometimes there's just like a level of connection, which I do miss. And that is just being from the Motor City.
I think without a doubt.
Yeah. Well, this is actually, we'll play the song. This is actually my song, Broken Girls Don't Cry, written by Luke Holden and myself. Here it is.
You were something I can never not adore, but your kiss was just the calm before the storm, like a vines on the tree We were woven from two, but the knife of your scorn cut me right through. Like fire, like rain, I feel that whiskey running through my veins. You hurt me, I'm torn down, I'm bleeding inside. You won't see one single tear in my eye, 'cause broken girls don't cry. Moving on from yesterday ain't an easy thing, but I keep moving down this road, 'cause I broke this ball and chain. I'll keep this short, I can't talk any longer. Honey, you couldn't kill me, you just made me stronger. Like fire, like rain, I feel that whiskey running through my veins. You hurt me, I'm torn down, I'm bleeding inside. You won't see one single tear in my eye, 'cause broken girls don't cry. The show is over, it's time to go now. The curtains are closed, but only I can take them back. Oh, like fire, like rain, I feel that whiskey running through my veins. You hurt me, I'm torn down, I'm bleeding inside. You won't see one single tear in my eye, 'cause broken girls don't cry. No, they don't cry. No, 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 they don't cry. They don't cry.
All right, well, Broken Girls Don't Cry
Hey.
deserves a little clap clap. I like that song so much. It's one of my mom's favorite songs, and I felt like, going through the catalog, I definitely love that one because it did have a different feel to it, and it was just something different, and it had a lot of soul, which since I moved to Nashville, sometimes I do miss that, having that like soul factor, which is not the common denominator here. Everything here is just super pristine and perfect, and the format and the Nashville songwriting format, and everything's got to be done a certain way, which I get it. It's a model that's been working for a long time. But back in Detroit, there is a level of soul and grit and grind
Motown.
that no other town has. So do you feel like that is something that plays a role in your music?
Yeah, inevitably. I think that there's there's certainly a force in that way of just feeling things, and I think that helps you stand out a lot in this city. Is you do have that unadulterated soul to your music, and I try to incorporate that as much as anything, because my music is emotional, it's visceral.
Yeah, it's emotional, and it's like really dark, but I like it. Like you said before, it's like a dark Americana, which I don't know anyone really doing that right now. And you feel like you're taking the risk that is necessary to sort of get ahead and be sort of have a really long and lucrative career, which I feel like you're in the range of like Chris Cornell and some of those guys, because those are, in my opinion, very amazing songwriters and singers, and I feel like they didn't even really get their musical peak till even like later in life.
No, Chris Cornell certainly didn't, and I can. Whew, man, still to this day, I'm not sure if I will ever fully accept, his passing.
I know.
Actually,
that was in Detroit. He stayed at Motor City Casino.
It was. Yeah,
yep.
He played at, I think it was the Fillmore.
MGM or one of those places.
Well, he was playing at the Fillmore, and then, he had gone and taken his own life after the fact. And I heard about, I remember I woke up at 7 a.m. or so, and you had posted something. You had posted a picture of him and said, "Oh my God, I can't believe this." And it just, I froze. I called my dad immediately because he and I are just, we adore Chris Cornell. And that rocked my world. And a lot of those grunge guys, and I love grunge. I'm a grunge junkie, no pun intended. But, they were martyrs for their music, and most of them died very young and quickly. Luckily, we had more of a legacy with Chris, but I don't think we'll ever see a singer like him or an artist like him ever again. Arguably the greatest singer in rock and roll.
Yeah, I think his voice is amazing. And I don't think he really came full circle to like later on, because some of the stuff that he did in the more beginning, I feel he was still developing his sound and his voice was still kind of maturing. But yeah, towards the end there, some of those acoustic records, I've listened to a few different ones. It's just his voice is so amazing and he just can do so many amazing things. So I feel like you're maybe along the lines of those paths where
I'll take it.
where you just had to continue to like live your journey and have something to talk about, have something to say. So I feel like that is kind of where you're falling in things. What are some other goals that you want to achieve with your music?
I really, every time someone, or a lot of the time when people hear my music, they're like, "Oh, I could hear that in a movie. I could hear that in a TV show." I'm like,
yeah.
All right, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So I'd love to sell some music to the realm of film, and I studied film in college. For what it's worth, an English degree from Michigan State.
Oh, no way.
I love Michigan State, but an English degree, it's like getting a degree in poverty. So
I went to Eastern, so
yes.
I remember my professor told me this is thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in debt. And here's the one thing that I remember learning. It was, what was it? I was taking a journalism class, and it says read and write and talk at 8th grade level. Basically dumb yourself down, because society, that's the level that we're at. I'm like, awesome. I'm paying money to educate myself, and I'm being taught to dumb myself down.
I just think of that scene in Good Will Hunting when he takes that kid on in the bar, and he's like, "Well, you could have gotten your whole education for $1.50 at the local bookstore." And I'm like, "You're right."
Yeah,
I hate it.
I know. What are your thoughts on higher level education?
I mean,
college?
At this point in time, obviously, everyone always says, you got to get your degree. Have to get your degree. Whereas now I think a bachelor's degree is parallel to what a high school diploma was for a long time. Not that it's useless by any means, because most of my friends I went to college with are doing outstanding things.
Yeah.
They're very successful. But I think at this point in time, I could get political, but I'm not going to get political.
Why not?
Oh, well, maybe I will get political. I think the whole, college tuition debate is, definitely a prevalent one. I think that government involvement has really exacerbated the confusion, what have you, whereas a lot of people are looking at it as a solution. I think that the universities have leeway to charge a lot more when the government is guaranteeing all of this money on behalf of everybody, which seems very humanistic, but that's why you're seeing tuition prices spike, is because the universities are like, "Oh, we can charge whatever the hell we want," because we know that the government is just going to funnel it in this way. So it's a lot of wasted funds and just a convoluted process that leads to higher tuition rates, higher inflation, and in the end, a lot more debt. So
yeah, my personal opinion on it is I believe having a trade or a skill is going to be a lot more lucrative, especially in today's world.
Exactly.
Because becoming a specialist in something is a commodity versus someone that just got like a degree like everybody else. How do you become an asset to the world? And that's just my opinion on things.
I think you're damn right.
I've seen more people do well by having a skill or a trade or a specialist or being certified in some particular thing, with myself included and my brother-in-law, a lot of people that I know that have sort of strayed off from this conventional way.
Absolutely.
I think having a higher level education, if you want to be a doctor, obviously a lawyer, something to that nature, but to be creatives like you and I, it's really hard to put ourselves in this sort of like category or box when, you know, we think a little bit differently than the normal person.
Absolutely.
So I feel like there should be a path for us.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're starting to get to that point, but we're still, as a society, like you said, forced to think this is the only way that we can go.
Yeah.
And I think we're starting to think a little bit more differently. But hopefully that's a
ideally
trend.
I mean, take it from a kid who got an English degree in film and otherwise studied journalism and Spanish too, but you know, my ultimate goal in college, take it from me, I have over $30,000 in debt, and I cannot see any time in the foreseeable future when I'm going to use that degree. So
That's exactly my point.
Yeah.
Is that versus becoming a specialist in something. For instance, my brother-in-law, who was actually my first guitar player, that's how they all met, and married my sister, but he has been on and off with college and this and that, whatever, in and out of jobs. He was in the military. He's you know, just trying to find his path. In the last 2 years, he became a specialist in AC, like heating and cooling, and now he's making like serious money because he created his own sort of like domain, and now he became a specialist and he got certified in that particular market, and he works a lot and he makes overtime. And he has benefits and all these things, and now he wants to eventually get his own business.
Totally. So I love
think
free markets.
That's, you know, we live in America and we're able to do that. So I find that very interesting. But yeah, I don't know how we got on this subject, but I do agree. I think, you know, college is good for some people and only some people, and leave it at that.
You know what Mark Twain said? He said, you know, never let my schooling get in the way of my education. You know,
that's so true. Oh my gosh, I love that.
He said a lot of things.
Yeah, that's so true. Who are some of your inspirations?
Oh, I love this question. I do. Honestly, if I, you know, to rifle things off, I could talk about grunge from start to finish.
Okay, top 5
years.
grunge bands.
Alice in Chains is just first and foremost there, and then obviously Pearl Jam, Nirvana. Temple of the Dog was my favorite thing Chris Cornell ever did, you know, with those guys from Pearl Jam. And then, you know, top 5, I mean, there were only a small handful of them, you know, and they were short-lived. They were all, you know, obviously so close up
what
there
about
in
Candlebox?
Seattle.
Is that
I like
considered
Candlebox. Yeah, actually,
grunge?
I know their guitar player, Mike Leslie. Do you know Mike Leslie? He's from...
Yeah, I know Mike.
He's from Michigan.
Yeah, he's from Mike. He's got dark hair.
Yeah,
I know who he is. Yeah.
He plays for Candlebox. I had actually hopped on stage with him one time. I think he said he went to Rochester Adams. He probably wouldn't even remember me, but you know, these whatever, man, like Mad Season, Soundgarden, everything those guys did, they were brothers. They were just they were in love with their trade, and they had something really, really crucial to say that was not being, you know, augmented in rock and roll prior to that point, and they lived for their music, and you know, they would have died for it, and they did. They all, they're all dead. I mean,
know, right?
It's tragic,
So
but
sad.
you know, they were such poetic martyrs. But you know, there's grunge music, and as of late, I'm obsessed with Nick Cave. You know,
Oh yeah.
I love Nick Cave.
Yep. I was listening to some of his stuff because after we talked initially about doing some stuff together, I heard him and I knew a couple songs, but then I kind of digged a little deeper.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's so cool.
Yeah, he's
I love
got some
that.
very dark poetry, and you know, I love Nick Cave. I love Townes Van Zandt. You know, Ryan Bingham, Lara Lynn, all of these artists that you know, they have incredible word pictures with how they write, and you know, there's a visceral element, and you know, a lot of metaphors woven in symbolism. But I'd be lying if I said that authors didn't play a major role, you know, like Cormac McCarthy, Edgar Allan Poe, Henry James, you know, the Marquis de Sade.
Stephen King?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
went through a big Stephen King phase when I was young. Last Stephen King book I read was Salem's Lot, long time ago. Not a long time ago, 5-6 years ago. But, yeah, Stephen King was, I mean, if you don't go through a Stephen King phase, I don't know if I trust you fully.
Well, you know, he wrote a lot of dark stuff, but he didn't.
Yeah.
He wrote The Green Mile. I mean,
He did, and he wrote Shawshank.
Yeah.
That was the first Stephen King story I wrote, was Shawshank, or read, was Shawshank.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
He wrote a lot of different genres. It
Yeah, he
wasn't.
did.
He's most famous for the darker stuff, but yeah, that's amazing. How do you feel like the music is today? Because you mentioned a lot of, you know, older bands.
Yeah, yeah.
What about today's scene? What's your thoughts and feeling on that?
Oh boy, I got to be careful with what I say. I don't think that I have anything much different to say about music. I think that we are in an age of a lot of expendable music, and it's pretty one-dimensional as far as what we can make sell and what is promoted.
Why do you think that is the case?
Well, I mean, you could get really psychological about it and say it's because of diminishing attention spans and what have you. But it's easily consumable. I will say that I'm not going to mention any names, but a lot of, pop music is, I think it's kind of junk food for the brain.
Yeah.
I sound so pretentious, but I really don't care.
Yeah.
It's just, I think so much of it is just junk food for the brain. There's a difference between amusement and entertainment, and I think it's clear which one of those things is being...
I think we lack the soul.
Yeah, we do lack the soul. We do.
Like I said a minute ago.
I think that music and the arts are a very higher form of communication because, we shouldn't downplay how important they are. So many ideas, so many revolutionary elements are ingrained in art and music. I mean, ask Bob Dylan, for God's sake. And we're missing that. I don't think, if there was a VH1 behind the music, there wouldn't be a whole lot to gravitate toward at this point in time. But there's still amazing pop artists out there. Or very popular ones. We see Adele. We see. I think Bruno Mars is pretty cool, man.
Oh, he's awesome. I've seen him live.
Yeah,
he's amazing.
Lana Del Rey's great. Jesus, now it's escaping me.
Yeah, it's just a different time and a different way to hear the music now because it's all social media driven. And there's bands that are huge that are like, I don't even know who these people are. And they're selling out, tours and stuff.
Yeah.
So I think it's just different. Like before, back in, like you and I were growing up, there was just one source. There was like MTV and there was VH1 and, that was it. And then there was your radio station and everything was funneled through those few different things. And now I think it's just so vast that it's really hard to keep up with all the different things. But I think you can. It's a good time, but it's just different now because you can really make things happen as an independent artist if you can funnel it correctly, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And it's a whole other
now.
madness to the method.
Yeah.
Method to the madness, what have you, because everybody has their own personal little world of social media and what have you that only they're gonna their personal interests are going to be catered to them and pitched to them through their social media outlets and what have you, so it's hard to throw a big blanket over everybody's attention and everybody's awareness, which is why you have to be very strategic with how you advertise and present yourself.
And I feel like having a niche in something is what's going to sort of get you catapulted to success. And, having like a household name, unless you have millions behind you, which a lot of people don't realize that that's how names become huge, you have to put millions and millions of dollars behind you. So if you don't have that as an option, I think becoming niche-y to an extent, and I think that's where you are super spectacular because you have this niche and you have this sound that I don't think anybody really is doing at this point. I don't know if it's just a lack of depth or they just don't feel like, that's something that they want to do or they're just maybe scared of or whatever. And I think you having this sort of dark, side of things is going to help you continue to grow your music and grow your fan base.
I hope so. And I can't expect everybody to want to, delve into the depths of hell, to make art. But I personally, I like it. So.
Well, you have a sort of a dark demeanor about you. I mean, you're like the nicest person I've ever met.
Thank you.
And you're like so authentic and genuine, but you do have sort of a dark context to yourself. Talk about that. You're atheist?
Yes.
How did you sort of transition to that?
Growing up, I was raised in a moderate religious household, and my parents always,
Were you Catholic?
Yeah, more or less.
Yeah.
We bounced around, just trying different things, different churches, but not avidly by any means. My parents were always proponents of free thought, and provided a very malleable environment for us to find our own way. Again, just wonderful, heartfelt people, and both of my sisters as well. I'm very close with my family. But I am somebody who obsesses. I am somebody who has always been very pedantic about, the important and non-important things in life, in my own head. And as a kid, I made myself read the Bible every night. And to me, it was just very important because, it's a matter, not just a matter of life and death, it's a matter of eternal torment or eternal salvation. And that's a really intense thing for somebody to have to, absorb as a human being, but as a child all the same, even more so. And there was a lot of just, internal confusion because I would, read things in the Bible like, he who slays an ox is like he who slays a man. And it's like, well, I can't go hunting with my dad now. Or, the eye of the needle, easier for a camel to enter through the eye of the needle than for a rich man to get into the kingdom of heaven. And it's like, okay, well, I can't be financially successful now. It was just a lot of contradiction and confusion and guilt that I was enduring. It was cumbersome. And finally, I was around the age of 15. I just had what you would call an apostasy, and I just felt a weight lifted off of me. And then it was a little over 10 years ago now. I was 17 when I picked up The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins. Phenomenal book, phenomenal mind. And things have been different ever since. Now, since being in this recovery program where a higher power is integral to your health and your well-being, things have changed. I wouldn't say that my ideas about, creationism or lack thereof, or the universe have changed, but, the prism through which I actually view it is different now because of this amazing program that I'm involved in, and that talks a lot and puts a lot of emphasis on a higher power.
You made a great analogy. I think we had this conversation at my listening party about, you said there's an acronym for God.
Yeah.
That was really interesting.
Good orderly direction.
Yeah.
is what the program refers to it as. So
explain that.
Well, because, and I'm in Cocaine Anonymous, which is not drug specific, mind you. It's just a really great community of young people and older people that is, mutually supportive of one another. And, admitting yourself and submitting yourself rather to something outside of yourself, because the notion is that, as addicts, we have tried to control everything. And we've been nothing but self-serving and misled in our own actions and our own ideas of how to interpret the world. And, the necessary component is to seek something outside of yourself and to, concede power to a higher power. I mean, this coffee cup is outside of me. It's not me. This coffee cup is technically a higher power, but, it's all, it's whatever your conscious contact with, quote unquote, God is, whatever your idea of God is going to be your higher power. To me, it's a higher set of principles. It's a moral code that is that's there. A series of principles that are evidently ones that are highly preferable and will keep you in a good place of compassion and selflessness, good decision making, what have you, and to be able to embody it into a certain idea that is outside of yourself doesn't necessarily need to have a mystical piece of it all, but it's enough to say if I'm feeling in my head, if I'm feeling screwed off, I can give it up. I can give it up to something outside of myself and trust that it's all going to be okay. So
very philosophical.
Yeah, I use way too many words. So if I start talking too much, just tell me to shut the hell up.
This is why we co-write. That's why we write songs, right?
I suppose so.
Okay, so I find that very, very profound. How you went from reading the Bible to just having this moment of like, I'm not going to believe in that, and you felt like this weight was lifted off.
Absolutely, yeah.
And
the cross, so to speak. I was no longer bearing the cross.
What's funny though is how there's so many parallels with like what you're saying, that correlates to religion.
Oh, absolutely.
I guess that makes, I don't know how to explain it, but like for me personally, like my relationship with God, okay, good orderly direction, as you say, I like that, is completely different, in my opinion, to religion. Like I don't care for religion. That's not, because I was born and raised Catholic, and same thing. It was sort of this weird transition out of it, and then you sort of find your place in your spiritual world. I think everyone's journey is different. I think you making the cognitive choice, is important, and being able to really methodically think through that is very charismatic, and versus someone who's just like, oh, well, whatever.
Yeah, of course.
And versus you actually putting this thought behind it in a reasoning factor to it. I find that really interesting.
Absolutely. And I mean, I got to ask, if you were to put your idea of God or your definition of God, your personal relationship of God, how would you describe that?
Yeah, I mean, it's just something that is a higher power necessarily,
Sure.
and something that I can sort of go and turn to and talk to.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't know who I'm talking to.
Well, you know, that's
you know what I mean?
That's kind of how I you know, when I share in meetings, I'll say, you know, I don't want to fully understand what God is, because if I did, I'd try to control it.
Yeah.
You know? Because that's what's gotten me into this pit in the first place, is trying to control everything around me, trying to control, you know, my ability or inability to control substance use and whatever else. So whereas I've always been pretty militantly critical of faith, I've become a little bit more recessed, where it's like, you know, I see where a higher power in somebody's life actually does redeem them. I see it firsthand every week, every day, you know, with you know, fellow addicts, and I'm like, dude, without this program, these people like myself would be royally screwed.
Yeah.
So,
because you mentioned your addiction situation, and I'm going to dig a little bit deeper. What exactly were you addicted to?
I was anything and everything that would, you know, get me out of myself. But, you know, we always talk about drugs of choice. You know, I think the peak of it all, became opiates, fentanyl, heroin. Mind you, I was snorting. You know, I wasn't shooting, for what it's worth. But everything had its day in the sun, man. You know, I loved cocaine. I loved Ambien, oddly enough, weed, booze.
When did all this start, and why and how?
Well, you know, as far as, you know, in high school and college, I loved to drink. And when I would drink, I would drink. You know, it was still a weekend warrior agenda. Or calendar, rather. But I mean, dude, I prided myself on my ability to throw back a bottle of whiskey. But near the end of college, I started experimenting a lot more with like cocaine and acid. At the same time, that was, you know, key.
Yeah.
But you know, I realized then and there that, you know, my ability to enjoy sobriety was diminishing slowly, and to feel home in my sobriety. And then over the, you know, next few years after moving here, I just became a lot more indulgent. You know, as the pendulum swings back between sobriety and not, it would get worse. It would cut deeper.
Was it part of your writing process? Was that a way for you to like write songs, be creative?
No.
So this is just all
Absolutely
kind of
not.
recreational.
I could say it.
Self-sabotage in a way.
Yeah. Anybody who has ever been addicted to anything, you know, their excuse is always, well, you know, a lot of the greatest minds, you know, use substances to produce their art. What about you, dude? What about me? No, I mean, no, I did very little creating when I was messed up, because I just wanted to be messed up. And you asked me, you know, why, you know, do you feel the need to do that? It's because I like to get high. It's as simple as that. No looking beyond that. There's no need to get fundamental about it and say, well, I have these, you know, deep-seated insecurities. It's like, yeah, we all have those, but, you know, my outlet just happens to be drugs and alcohol. I like to get high. That is the only reason why I do what I do.
Do you think that other things stem from that, perhaps depression or anxiety?
Well, yeah, you see parallels, you see constants and everything like that. But, you know, everybody has depression and anxiety now, not to
especially
downplay
for
it.
artists,
Absolutely.
creative people.
Yeah, Hemingway said something about that, where he's like, you know, artists are always miserable, what have you. If they weren't, they wouldn't be artists. I can't remember exactly what he was saying, but everybody's got anxiety, everybody's got depression, but everybody has different ways of manifesting it. Obviously, addicts choose a pretty outlandish way. But there's a fundamental divide, you know, because you've told me a little bit about how, you know, you have experienced certain trials and tribulations with emotions and anxiety and what have you. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Definitely.
I have anxiety, and I have depression, and I have ADHD. So, you know, there's a lot of those things that I didn't get that really till later in life, because I kept going to the doctor for depression, and, you know, why am I feeling this way? Why am I feeling this way?
Totally.
And I've been, you know, doing the on and off antidepressants for years, probably over a decade.
Me too.
And things would get better, things would get worse, things would get better, things would get worse, and one would hinge off the other.
Yeah.
And eventually it was more of an attention factor as well.
Sure.
Because it's so hard to really understand the complexity of what goes on in your head. But I think always being in the sort of creative state, it does lack a little bit of that structure. So,
Totally.
Kind of being able to dial that in a little bit more has helped me personally, believe it or not, with my anxiety and my depression. So it's all kind of working together. But yeah, I mean, you just learn to live with it, I guess.
So how do you cope? If you were to say,
Yeah, basically I cope. I've been good, lately. I think keeping myself really, really busy is good. But then I hit a point where I'm just exhausted and I can't do it anymore. And so I'll have to know like when to take a break or when to sort of just stop. And
Totally.
I just becoming years and years of doing this, you just know your triggers and you know your points. And that's a big reason why I don't tour anymore.
Yeah.
That's a big one because it's a major trigger and anxiety and depression and all those things.
Totally.
So being able to be in a controlled environment and having a regular schedule and a structure has helped me a ton. Being able to work out and, and luckily I've never gone down the addiction route of alcohol or drugs. I've never even tried those. And so it's just, it's interesting to see how everybody sort of,
exactly,
makes it work for them.
So you choose structure, you choose integrity, you choose peace of mind. I choose snorting pills. So right there's a fundamental difference. Because I like to get high. I will find any and every reason to do so, whether it be, being upset, the anxiety and the depression, or if I'm celebrating, or if I'm feeling elated. It's like I am on top of the world, I deserve this, or I know exactly, what's going to make this feel better.
Like it was food.
Yeah, well, that's another big thing too. That's another big thing, but I can't imagine your life is unmanageable because of it.
Well, you've been clean now for how long?
This time around will be 6 months in
That's good.
a couple weeks.
Great.
Yeah, it was a year and a half, and then I relapsed, and which is to be expected. That's what we do, is we relapse.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, I mean, hey, I always say we're only human, and it happens, So congratulations on the 6 months.
Appreciate it. Well, I'm not quite there yet.
Almost there. Almost there.
That there's no guarantee that I will stay clean tomorrow, but it's
one day,
just today.
one day at a time.
Yeah, you're damn right.
One day
it
at
is.
a time.
Yeah.
And until you continue to go to your meetings, and what's some advice to someone that may be struggling with this?
Get a sponsor, work the steps. Simple as that. Surrender what you think you know.
Yeah.
Walk into one of those meetings, get a sponsor, work the steps. That's the only thing.
What's a sponsor? What do you mean by that?
A sponsor is somebody who walks you through the steps, walks you through the 12
like
steps
a mentor.
of recovery. Yeah, more or less.
Okay.
Somebody who you need to take advice from. You look at and you say, well, clearly you have got your shit together. Your life is manageable. I'm not able to do that. I have tried to control my life and it hasn't worked. So, my sponsor is incredible. He's an amazing human being. I talk to him most days. And he's been the one who's had to say, you know what, shut up, sit down, do what I say, whether you like it or not. And, it's going to be okay. I mean, it's not quite that, demanding, what have you.
Right.
But
in our minds, sometimes we,
I need to be
like that.
Yeah, we need to be broken. Addicts need to be broken. So if you are struggling,
the tough love factor.
Yeah, you can try the Suboxone, you can try this or that, other impediments, but what's going on is not the drugs or alcohol, it's what's going on in your head and your heart. And the only thing that has kept people clean for as long as Alcoholics Anonymous has been around is the program itself. That's the only quote unquote cure, the closest thing to a cure we've had. Sustained abstinence is through working those steps. Simple as that. Get a sponsor, work the steps.
Yeah. So now that you've been sober for several months, have you been able to have a clearer head for your music,
man.
and being able
Absolutely.
to just really put everything you got into that?
I have never been happier to be in the city. Never been more productive, never been more excited. And it's not just, because of sobriety. It's because, a lot of it has to do with the principles inherent in those steps, which is manage your life. Don't make excuses, what have you. But I'm just, every day I wake up and I'm like, I'm grateful and I want to create. I want to work on my music. I had gotten out of a year and a half long relationship that didn't end so well. I think that had a lot to do with it. There were things throughout that were disgruntling and distressing for both of us, but that's over with. It's a good thing that it is. And now I think I have a runway, as long as I choose to have it, to be my best self, and I want to continue to do that.
That's amazing. Well, we'll kind of wrap this up, but what's next for Luke Holden, or should we say the next name that we want to choose?
What's next for me is probably, go grab a cup of coffee somewhere else. I don't know. But no, I have a live show. I have a live showcase on the 19th, which is this Friday, with my good friend St. Dorian at Finally Friday. There's a few other bands who are going to be there. That's at Live Oak. And I'm working on a brand new album, which is called Heathen Prayers. Not entirely sure when it's going to be out. Pre-production has almost been completed. And then obviously I have a new single coming out.
Yeah, absolutely. So how can people find you and get updates on your music?
I'm on Instagram,
okay.
Luke Holden Music. My official website is lukeholdenmusicofficial.com. I'm on Spotify. I'm on iTunes, just under Luke Holden. And I don't have a permanent address right now. I'm between places. Otherwise, I'd say
you're a gypsy.
Yeah, I am. I feel like it. Yeah. I'd say you can come to my apartment and throw bricks through my window if you want. And I will provide my social security number to anybody who calls in after the fact. If you have a call-in number, so
just Venmo me.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. We're gonna close out.
Thank you for having me, Justine.
With your song.
Very much.
This is Luke Holden.
Stay sweet.
Performing All the Same. Thank you so much for listening to Sonic Female Podcast. Until next time, I'm Justine Blazer.
Way out west, there's a garden of gold, far away from all the pain laid upon your soul, and it's a hurting, 'cause I finally know it's real. I watched your taillights fade away like fireflies in a field. Before you go away, just lay me in the grave. I find it hard to tell myself I lose you either way, but it's all over all the same. Come tomorrow, when I'm alone in this room, and there's nothing here but your silhouette and a low guitar that ain't in tune, forgiving me. I can't live like this. I'm gonna write this song in blood for you and pray that I'll be missed before you go away. Just burn me at the stake. I find it hard to tell myself I lose you either way, but it's all over all the same. Oh babe, stay today, but if you don't, it's all the same. I find it hard to tell myself I lose you either way, but it's all over all the same. I find it hard to tell myself I lose you either way, it's all over